So in the year of our Lord, 2023, Donald Trump is still out there on Truth Social, and he is saying repeatedly, it's time to get rid of Obamacare once and for all. Terminate it, terminate Obamacare, terminate it, and I will repeal and replace. So I feel like I hopped in a time machine and went all the way back to like 2017. Look, we've been through this before. I don't know if you guys remember the fight at the time, but the Republicans were like, we're going to get rid of Obamacare. And then for the longest time, they didn't actually have a replacement. They would just say, like, we're going to repeal it. And then what? And then finally, eventually, they crafted a god-awful plan, a horrific plan. By the way, Trump would keep going around saying, we're going to get rid of Obamacare, but I'm going to keep your protections for pre-existing conditions. And then when they finally released Trump Care, as they called it, his healthcare bill, guess what? It didn't have protections for pre-existing conditions. Of course. So they had this bill. By the way, Trump's healthcare bill was despised. The specifics, it's the classic stuff. Get rid of the lines around the states. You get rid of the lines. You do more privatization. You cut Medicaid. You know, you get, let the free market handle it. Let the free market handle it. And guess what? It had an approval rating of about 20%, his healthcare bill. So it was a horrible idea. It actually would have left more people without health insurance. I love how it's like, let's do a healthcare reform, but kick more people off of health insurance. What? Okay. Now, by the way, none of this is like, it's not like Obamacare is great, right? I'd much rather have a public option, and I'd much rather have Medicare for all over a public option, right? Literally any other kind of reform is better than Obamacare, but Obamacare was better than nothing, because at least you got millions, tens of millions more people to have healthcare, right? Okay. So we already went through this, and you guys remember, you know who saved the day in that fight? John McCain, shockingly. So he had some sort of personal beef with Trump, and then when it all came down to his vote. And remember, he was on the Senate floor, and he went like this. He went and put his thumb down and killed the attempt to repeal Obamacare and replace it with Trump Care. And even though it was all spite-driven and whatnot, still, it was like, oh, thank God, because it would have been worse. The healthcare system would have been worse. But anyway, Trump is still doing this. He's bringing out what he thinks are the old hits, playing the old hits. And thinks like, this will give me, I'll ride this wave of in the country to end up getting elected. Yeah, because in 2023, that's what people are yearning. Please get rid of our health care. No, if anything, people want like Medicare for all, or they want a public option. They want more people to have health care. They want universal health care. That's not what Trump wants. That's not what he wants. Okay, so look at this. So Trump comes out and says, let's get rid of Obamacare. And TV News covered it. Well, Media Matters did a really interesting breakdown that I wanted to share with you. TV News coverage, since Trump threatened to repeal the Affordable Care Act, mostly failed to mention these critical stakes. So what do they mean by that? What they mean is they would cover it, but they wouldn't actually bring up any facts about Obamacare and like how many people have healthcare as a result of it and what would happen if you did this. So here's what they say. TV News coverage of the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's November 25th threat to terminate the Affordable Care Act if he's elected to another term as president mostly failed to mention the effects that repealing the law would have. By not focusing their coverage on the stakes of Trump regaining office, major cable and broadcast news networks risk leaving voters unaware that their votes may mean they and tens of millions of other Americans lose health coverage. So on Truth Social, Trump wrote on November 25th that he's, quote, seriously looking at alternatives to Obamacare and that we should never give up efforts to terminate it. Trump doubled down on his threat with a promise to replace it with much better health care, adding, Obamacare sucks. NBC News reported that he, quote, hasn't offered a replacement plan and that in 2016 he endorsed a bill to undo part of the law, which was projected to eliminate coverage for about 23 million people. Republican lawmakers reacted to Trump's threat in various ways, from open support to concern that they would need to create a replacement first. NBC News reported that Senator Ted Cruz said he would, quote, love to see us revisit it. Of course you would, Ted Cruz. He's the biggest sycophantic cuck on the planet to Trump, or if Trump farts, he sniffs it and says it smells amazing. Senator Mike Rounds said that repealing the ACA would require us to start proposing what the change would be now so that we wouldn't be in a position of repealing without having a better replacement. Senator Mike Crapo, the most appropriate name in the world, opposed campaigning on repealing the ACA, saying of his preferred approach, I don't think it should be characterized as repealing any particular law. So some of the Republicans here, just so everybody understands, they learned the lesson, because when they tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act, what happened is there was a flood of these town halls where they had angry constituents basically yelling at them like, where the hell am I going to get my health care? I don't want my payment to go up. I don't want to lose my health insurance. What are you doing? And so that forced a lot of them to sort of, now they're taking a position like this. Okay, a 2017 analysis. So here are some of the facts that are not in the discussion as much as they should be. A 2017 analysis by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that as many as 133 million people, or 51% of non-elderly Americans, could be denied coverage without Obamacare because they have pre-existing medical conditions. A 2022 report from Health and Human Services showed that 35 million Americans were enrolled in health coverage related to the ACA, including 21 million enrolled through the law's Medicaid expansion. Health and Human Services reported that in 2020, 58 million women benefited from Obamacare's preventive services and birth control coverage, which has saved billions of dollars in out-of-pocket spending on contraceptives since the ACA was passed. So here we go. None of the ABC, CBS, and NBC morning, evening, and weekend news programs had segments on Trump saying he's going to repeal Obamacare. Fox News covered Trump's threat in only 2 segments. Both segments failed to mention the loss of benefits that would affect millions of Americans. CNN covered Trump's threat to replace the Affordable Care Act in 16 segments, but mentioned its expected effects on millions of Americans in only 2 of them, or in 13% of the segments. MSNBC had the most substantial coverage of Trump's threat with 17 segments and discussed its effects on millions of Americans in 8 of those segments. So even MSNBC, who covered this the best, it was a little bit less than half of the segments that actually brought up what would happen policy-wise to the American people if we went down this path. Overall, cable news covered Trump's threat in 35 segments, but covered its effects on millions of Americans in only 10 of those segments. Only 29% of the segments said, here's what he says he wants to do. Here's what the actual effects would be in terms of policy and how it would impact your life. So here they have, as you can see, cable news coverage of Trump's threat to repeal Obamacare. Segments without context on CNN, 14. Only 2 of them had the context. There were 2 segments on Fox News. None of them had context. On MSNBC, 9 segments didn't have context. 8 segments had context. I mean, look, credit to Media Matters. I mean, sometimes I don't like what Media Matters does. Sometimes I do like what they do. This is an example of what I think is important, right? Because this shows you a specific way in which the media usually fails us. So here you have Trump in no uncertain terms saying, I want to get rid of Obamacare. I want to terminate it. That's what I want to do. And your job, if you're covering a presidential candidate who's leading on the Republican side, here's what he's saying policy-wise he wants to do. Here's how that would impact you. Now, if the media cover these things the way they should, then on every issue where Trump's taking an insane position, it would be, here's his position, here's what that would mean for you. And that would change people's minds over time. He certainly wouldn't be leading by 3 points in the average for the general election. He certainly wouldn't be leading in 5 of 6 swing states. If this was the case, he probably wouldn't even be winning the Republican primary if Trump was covered effectively and efficiently and intelligently by the media across the board with all the various things he says. So this is like trying to get through. This is how you cover the news and do your job in a serious way. In a serious way. But usually when we have the drive-by media bringing up things, not touching on the specifics, not talking about how it would impact the American people, everything kind of gets out of whack. And now you're put in a position where you have Trump almost certainly going to win the Republican nomination and Biden going to win the Democratic nomination. And it's like, nobody actually wants that, but that's what we're going to get. We need like a better media to educate us more and to help steer the ship a little better in a more reasonable direction, but we don't have that. It's all kind of stupid and dull and closed-minded and simple, and it's a sign of our decaying, decrepit, rotten society, right? So anyway, good analysis here from Media Matters. Damning, man. This is damning. If you're going to cover Trump, which you should, the best way to do it, here's his stated policy position, here's how that would really impact you in a negative way. That is how you cover Trump the right way. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.